Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I forgot what the name of the show was, and I've only been doing it for several years, so how would I remember anything like that? I got a great guest with me, Latasha Blackmond, who's joining us from the US on the East Coast, and we'll get to know about that. And we'll be talking about her work in terms of communications, particularly with giving skills and tips to young people communicating in the modern world on the internet, the worldwide terror web that it is, and how to use social media healthily. So a really, really important topic. Just to remind folks, this is pre-recorded now, the show, so don't call me anymore because I might be doing something else and you might get an upset me rather than a very welcoming me. But please do send me messages on WhatsApp, 07506 319 745. If you're outside of the UK, that's +44, drop the first zero. So 07506 319 745. The number will be up as well, and it'd be lovely to hear from you if you've got any questions or comments that you want to add in, or just add them in under the video as you're watching it. And if you've got any questions for Latasha, not Latisha, I'll be happy to send them off to her. I'm sure she'll be delighted to respond to you. So all of that's done, and I'm just going to say hello to Latasha. Welcome to London. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm well. Thank you for having me. And thank you to your guests for watching, tuning
It's
in.
great. It's great. Like I said, saying before the show started, I think it's such an important topic. Helping young people, and particularly young women, navigate some of the darker sides of social media and the online world, which does feel at times that it's got some sort of uncomfortable things going on, as well as the many benefits. One of them being, for example, prior to the pandemic, none of us had heard of Zoom, and here we all are zooming around all over the world. Can you imagine life without all of
I
this
know,
stuff?
no.
You know what I mean? So it's not going anywhere, but we are still, I think, in the early days of navigating it healthily and safely. And Latasha's going to take us through some of that. You're from New York originally, Latasha?
Yeah, I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Um, Born and raised there to immigrant parents. So both my parents are from Panama.
Yeah.
Most of my family. So I'm first generation. And then I moved to Maryland probably like 20 something years ago. So I moved to Maryland, small town outside of Baltimore,
Yeah.
which is a very little charming town. Baltimore is very charming.
Yeah. What do you remember about New York? I mean, I go there. I have been there quite a lot. I haven't seen since the pandemic, but I used to go there a lot because it's very easy to get to from.
Oh, my fondest, and I still go because a lot of my family's still there. So my fondest memories, like as a kid, is summertime in New York. Just a
Yeah.
lot of kids just kind of hanging around. Um, all the things that you've probably seen on TV, like with the kids with the fire hoses, the fire hydrants, and
Yeah.
playing in the street. And it's just a lot of kids, a lot of music, a lot of block parties. So that definitely was my childhood.
Yeah. I mean, New York reminds me a lot of London in the sense of it's quite a melting pot. London,
Yeah.
everybody from all over the world lives in London, which is one of the things I really, really like about it. And it's unique in that way.
Yeah.
When I go
Yeah.
to New York, it has that feel as well. Is that your experience?
Oh yeah, like I mean, the beauty about New York is like every culture you can even
Yeah.
think of, even like places you didn't even think of in the world. You in New York, you'll find a small pocket of them, right?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty about New York. If you want, like, what? It's like I would really want like a Greek burger. I don't know if they even have burgers, but like if you want authentic Greek food, you can find it because they have like little areas all throughout New York. You have little Chinatown. You have everywhere. Like where we grew up, most of this Caribbean neighborhood.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, like where I grew up in, my building was people were Panamanian. So my almost like the entire building I live in. So if you wanted something to eat, you can go to the neighbor, cook the exact same food that your mother cooked. And a lot of times they brought all the stuff back from Panama back here. So that that's what I miss the most about it.
I mean, it's quite extraordinary. It's amazing as well. They work so well, that some people would have us believe that melting pots don't succeed, but
They
they
do.
they do.
because it gives you like, it just makes you a more well-rounded person, right? So
Yeah.
if you need to be around different cultures, different people to see how different people see the world, right? Like if you're just in your bubble and you only do a certain thing, you kind of limit yourself a little bit, right? But if you stretch yourself just a little bit, just a tiny bit, you get to, see different cultures. The same things like through traveling, right? So, just definitely always try to put yourself in situations where, there's diverse set of people, right?
Yeah.
Age, race,
Yeah.
nationality, and you'll find that it's not as scary as you think it is. It's pretty
Yeah.
fun actually. You get to taste the world, right, globally.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I think from a psychological perspective, we know diversity is really good for our health and well-being.
Yeah, definitely, because um you just think about work, right? Just if you just kind of look at it from a working standpoint, you have people from different ages. You have, baby boomers, you have Gen X, you have millennials. So you have all these different people and they bring in different experiences, how they move about the world, how they navigate it. So you get to see so many different things. So imagine if you did that exponentially
Yeah.
with cultures. So yeah, it is definitely, there's a benefit to it, right? There's no downside of it. There's definitely a benefit.
Well, there's definitely benefit to what we call neurodiversity. So having your brain having to sort of adapt to lots of different types of people has well sort of researched health benefits, both psychological and physical as well. And I think of things like, if you think of things like AA groups, do you know AA, Alcoholics
Yeah,
Anonymous?
alcoholics, no, yeah.
And they're these groups where people are joined for a specific purpose, and that purpose is to stay sober. And alcoholism can affect any age, any gender, any culture. And so you get quite a melting pot in those groups. And because people have a common purpose, which is to stay sober, they continue to go to them.
Yeah.
Even with a bunch of strangers and new strangers and stuff like that. And then they don't realize they're getting these amazing global health benefits because they're having to adapt and learn how to be with lots of different types of people. The
Yeah.
way I think about it is like this. If you go to the gym and you just exercise your right bicep, you'll get a really good bicep, but you won't get a healthy body.
Yeah.
It's the same with your mind.
You always have to use
Really, you have to have a healthy body, you have to exercise all of your body. To
all of
have
your
a
body.
healthy mind, you have to be broad and have challenges and have new personalities and new things to learn. So, good stuff. I mean, one of the things I love about London is the fact that it attracts people globally, and that sort of I will meet attitudes and ideas and people, not even that I agree with, but I still find fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, because that in itself is healthy. But like you were talking about before, the brain needs it because it creates, like, the brain is very neuroplastic, so it creates all these different
Yeah,
snaps, synapses in it. So, and that's how it can stave off like dementia,
yeah,
other aging diseases. So it's really important to kind of do
yeah.
those things.
And I
Yeah.
think there's a link as well, and we'll come to that later. There's a link to one of the major problems with social media is the algorithms reducing diversity
Yeah.
and reducing people's capacity to have a broad range of opinions and attitudes and becoming quite extreme in views.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
amplification of extremism, but we'll definitely come to that. I'm always interested in people's sort of early life experiences because I wonder how much of those experiences influence choices that we make later. Did you have siblings as well, or so were you an only
Oh, I
child?
come from a big family. Yeah, I come from five brothers and one
Wow,
sister and five older brothers at that.
you're still
So,
alive. Well done.
yeah, I survived. I should get a T-shirt that says
You
that, right? Like,
should.
I survived. I should get a T-shirt. But yeah, so you're right. Even though we may not recognize it, I think as you get older, you know that your childhood has such an effect on who
Yeah,
you are as an adult. Because even if you at this basic level, you can be like, "Man, I'm doing the same thing my mom did." Right? Like, you start to repeat your mom. You're like, "I sound like my mom," or "I sound like my dad." So
yeah,
you realize like how much of an influence that
yeah.
those formative years have,
But
and the decisions you make and how you do things.
And again, it's part of that thing that you discussed about personality formation through synapses in the brain. And this is how our personality grows, is through our interpersonal relationships. And of course, those early ones with our family set a pattern or a tone, for good or ill. For most people, it's for good. For some people, it's not so good, and they have to do work to change those patterns. What do you think, were the big positive takeaways from coming from a large family for you and surviving all those older brothers? And well done.
Well, I think the positive thing is finding your voice. I think when you are in a large family, and if you do not speak up, you will be left out, right? Like, so, right? So I think it's learning to speak up, right? Learning to be an advocate for yourself.
Right.
Yeah, you learn that, but you also learn, like, it takes a little while, right? After your brothers pick on your line, but like which battles to fight and which one don't, right?
Yeah. And
right,
often,
so you learn that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I come from a large Irish Catholic family, so I learned how to hoard my food from my siblings.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice, but yeah, not embarrass my siblings. Learn to stuff everything. I became
all the same whenever we get together. It's like hands around the food. Get away! It's
mine. So you put your name on stuff. So yes, I try not to embarrass my siblings, but that is a byproduct of having a large family.
Yes, and learning to stand up for yourself, sometimes physically as well, not just emotionally. But I mean, I really identify with that. I identify with the notion of an immigrant family as well, because my parents moved to England from Ireland, and there's a lot of people who did that, and brought that sort of immigrant sort of sensibility with them. Like for my mum, for example, she was always, she was one of those mothers who she was very concerned about how we appeared to be in the world. I mean, it was very important to her how we were turned out, our clothing, our manners, our politeness with people was very important to her. Integration into the broader culture was, although that word was never used, it was really important to her, and success at school, in life, and happiness, and so these were the types of values which from many sort of immigrant families, I think those are common types of themes. Is that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hit it right in the head. I think at the very beginning of the book, I kind of talk about that, how my mother, how such emphasis she put on representation and doing well, and how representing her. And with us too, it was like you had to balance, and I'm pretty sure, being a kid of immigrants, that balancing both cultures, right? So what's outside of your friends and balancing at home, and your family not wanting to lose their culture, right? Because they celebrate it. So I think that was a big thing. I mean, lucky for me that my entire childhood was around everyone that was like me, right? So every kid was either from the Caribbean islands of Central America, or their parents was, right? So when I went to elementary school, everybody was like that. Every junior high school was like that. My building was like that. Right. So it was like a little Central America, Caribbean area, right? So, so it wasn't so much of assimilating. If anything, it was more like holding on, right? Because you may have Haitians, you may have Trinidadians, so I think it was, you found in that community, I think what was lucky for us, it was like there was a proudness, right, that came with it, like, representing your country and your flag. So in that sense, I was kind of lucky, but I think New York allows that, right? But I think if I probably grew up in Virginia or in Maryland or maybe DC, I wouldn't have that opportunity to grow up with people that look like me. So funny enough, like when I moved here, it was almost like a culture shock, because I was like, there's no way to get peas and rice in Oxford. So, and I was like, well, where's the, so it was almost like a culture shock, because it's like, you didn't find people that spoke Spanish like you, or people that didn't look like you or had the same features like you, right? So I didn't experience that until my late 20s. And that was like a small culture shock to be like,
There's a world outside. I think it's interesting. There's something about small island culture as well, which is where people are protective of the culture. And just thinking about the Caribbean islands, and I I know a lot of people from various Caribbean islands, and they're mortified if you get the islands wrong, and
Yeah.
sort of
Oh yeah,
you
absolutely. They're
just
like,
really
what
have to be very
happened?
careful with that. And
Yeah.
it's also next, if you're over in London, there's a really good Caribbean food takeaway just up the road from me, and
Oh,
I'll get
okay.
you some nice rice and peas. So don't you worry.
Don't tempt me with a good time. You're like,
And a
how
bit
did you
of
get here, Latasha? I'm like, you
bit of
told
stewed
me. But...
chicken and a bit of curry goat, and we could
Oh,
get you happy. Don't you worry. So that's
yes.
fine. I grew up on that food as well. I come from Birmingham originally, and like a lot of this is true in England. I don't know, but immigrant communities were together, particularly in my growing up. Irish and Caribbean communities lived side by side, and very
Nice.
much in the same areas. So, and the same where I live now used to be almost totally Irish and Caribbean, and now has assimilated much more, and things
Okay.
move on. But it's interesting as we grow and then we come out of our own cultural bubbles. There's something about our own childhoods are always normal to us, but maybe strange to other people.
Yeah.
And then we get a bit older, like you said, you're in 20, and that's normal, I think. It's a usual story.
Yeah.
Begin to branch out. Now, if we've had a good enough childhood, that branching out doesn't frighten us. It might be a bit weird, but we've
Yeah. It
learned to
doesn't
embrace
frighten
it
you.
as
Yeah.
interesting and
Yeah.
a new part of our life, which obviously happened to you. And
Yeah.
so you went through the school system in New York, and then did you go to you would say college, we would say
Yeah,
university.
yeah. So in London, you would say university. We'll say college. So I started college there, and then I finished it in Baltimore. So I finished my master's in
Yeah.
Baltimore. So I
And
started initially, yeah,
and you sort of did a master's in
public administration.
right.
Yeah,
So that
public
meant you
administration.
moved into government work, working
Yep,
for.
you kind of went into government work. Yeah, working with the city courts. I worked with Baltimore City, like the drug courts and stuff like that. Like one of the first drug courts that was set up in Baltimore City.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was really fortunate to, be a part of that and see that how it started. But that kind of got me into government work,
Yeah.
right? State
What,
and local government work.
so what was it that attracted you towards that? Not the
Well,
specific
initially,
work, but just in general, that sense of wanting to work in public services as opposed to become a captain of industry. What
uh,
was your,
well, initially I was going to law school.
were you?
And yeah, I was going to law school, took the LSAT, did everything, came here and worked, in the court system. It was like, maybe not. And that's how I changed to communications and working in communications.
Okay.
But initially, I was going to law school. But being a public servant has always been, even like my first job in New York, at 18. Like, so I always knew being a public servant was something I wanted to do. It was, because you have to give back, right? I think that's I think Muhammad Ali says this quote, like, or Maya Angelou is like, living on earth is the service, and volunteerism is what we pay to live here.
Yeah.
So I already knew that public service was the thing I
Was
wanted
that
to get into.
part of the culture of your family and growing up as well, or was it something that
Um,
inspired you?
yeah, I think that it definitely probably shaped it, right? I think just seeing, understanding the hardships that parents may have had coming to this
Yeah.
country, understanding that it does take a lot of people, or it takes a lot of people to, raise families and to help, everybody's helping out. So that, even if subconsciously, right, where it was something I was been drawn to.
Yeah. And community, being part of community and supporting
Yeah.
each other, being very important. It can go the other way for some people, that they just want to go away and make their own life and sort of leave
Yeah.
it
It
behind.
just,
But and so you went into communications, into sort of state government initially, and then into federal government.
yeah. So I started in state, like I said, I started with the courts and working there for a few years, and then went to the actual justice side of the federal government, like the justice and criminal justice side of it, enforcement side. So I would say law enforcement, enforcement.
Okay.
And that kind of, because my bachelor's is in criminal justice,
Okay.
so it was definite, trajectory going there.
Right.
So, and in the federal government, it just so vast how it is and how much they help people. And it that's what attracted to me, right? Just like being a public servant on such a national level,
Yeah.
right? And so seeing all the inner workings and the great things that they do.
And tell me about the sort of communication side of it, because people may not understand what that is. I'm not sure I do as well, but
Well, yeah, sure, because there's so many different things of communications, right? So you can have
yeah,
marketing. A lot of my stuff was I probably did all of it, right? Like public affairs. So that was for some time.
yeah,
Public affairs, doing marketing, right? So marketing of materials and things like that, making sure that having key messages, making sure that you're staying on message, making sure that you're dispelling any myths, right?
yeah,
So brand awareness, right? Making sure that your agency is seen in a good light and making sure that, all the good things that they do is getting out to the public, the external public.
yeah.
So, and crisis communication. So that's kind of like where that and doing web. So part of marketing, digital engagement is doing web work and making sure that things are on your website and that the people can find it
Yeah.
and they can and do what they need to do as they use the various websites from the federal government.
And it's quite complicated because it's often governed by legislation and laws as well, isn't it? What you can and can't say and how you communicate and who you
Absolutely.
communicate to and what languages and all that sort of stuff. So it
Absolutely.
can be a really quite complicated. And has that been the major part of the work and still is in terms of you do the marketing side of things, or is it
Yeah. Yep.
evolved?
Still a lot. Yep. A lot of marketing, a lot of communication. Key messages, making sure brand awareness, making sure we get our word out and let people know the great things that we're doing.
Yeah.
On behalf of the federal government.
And do you engage with social media as well on behalf of the government as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah. We
I'm
do.
just interested in how you got into this other
Social
side of
media.
things.
Yeah. So on that end, one of the agencies I work for, I ran an entire social media shop.
Right.
So you get to see firsthand how the public perceives you, what questions they have, the sentiments, positive and negative sentiments. So you get to see social media up here, and then that kind of led me to having a digital engagement company, my own company for a little bit, and working with the former Baltimore City mayor, things of that sort, right? And working with what is now our governor, but years before he was a governor. So just working in that space of social media
Yeah.
consultant.
And that's really quite high pressure stuff. I mean, it's sort of because it's that, if something negative goes viral, that could be career ending, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. The risk could be very high.
Yeah. And also, it's also an environment in which people like to hijack and take control of. And I'm thinking here, sort of in terms of, so I was one of the first psychological therapists, one of the first psychotherapists who went and started using social media. For a long time, a lot of people in my profession were afraid of it. They also vilified it and they said it's damaging. That's it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And they were really concerned about the misinformation in those spaces, which there is a lot of.
Yeah.
My argument always was that it was not really going to go anywhere, and that the way of dealing with it was to put positive, sensible, trustworthy information out there and create platforms that had content that was trustworthy. So that was my decision quite some time ago. So I was a sort of early adopter of it. Now everybody and their auntie is on it. So it's sort of like it's nothing
Yeah.
new. But I still, my philosophy is to have stuff on social media, the social media platforms we have that is trustworthy and useful to the public. And
Yeah, useful and being authentic. I think people want that. They seek that out for
yeah,
people to be authentic. Um, and I think, for the most part, people want accurate information, right? It's just so much information to go through. So, and if you get someone who speaks very loudly and affirmatively, you may believe what they say, right? Even though it may be wrong, right? So I think it's a lot of information that you have to go through to kind of seek out what is true, what isn't, what's a soundbite, what's just been parroted, right? So that's why it's very important to do your own research, to try to figure out, try to get down to the source as to why certain things are purported, why, why certain things are said, why certain things in the echo chamber, and how does certain things get legs and just, go off. So
Yeah. So we're establishing that, I mean, you've learned sort of in the crucible of sort of political interaction, how this stuff works and sort of the
yeah.
types of issues. So you're well sort of positioned to be able to discuss it from the position of the concerns that parents have, for example, about their daughters in particular using it. Do you have children yourself, Latasha?
I do. I have one daughter,
Okay.
and she's a teenager. Luckily for me, she's a great kid. Like I hit
Yeah.
the kid lottery. So, but that was like one of the impetus of me writing a book, like having a daughter, talking to her friends, having nieces and nephews. I come from a large family, so that means I have lots of nieces and nephews, but just talking to them and just listening, right? A lot of times it's not talking at them, but just listening and observing like what they're doing, what they're saying,
Yeah.
and how they're digesting information.
Well, one of the things I'm aware of in the conversation that you and I are having is that you and I will have very different experiences of social media because of how people will perceive us and then respond to us based upon their perception. So, you as a woman, you'll have a different and more negative experience, the evidence
Oh
shows.
yeah.
And as a woman of color, you will have a more negative experience because you'll be targeted on social media. And I won't be in the same way because I'm an older white guy, and I come with the privilege of that.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
I choose to have it or not, it's just there. It comes
Yeah.
with the way I look and also the way I talk, because I have this sort of what people think of as a posh English accent, and that gives me status and gravitas and all this sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I have which maybe you wouldn't get, and I'm certainly not going to be targeted in the same way. So do you mind if we talk about that and sort of
Yeah, I
experiences in
think,
those
and I
spaces?
think that's very important because I think that's the conversation that doesn't have it happen, right? The honest
Yeah,
conversation of how layered it can be and how social media affects different people, right? How it affects a Black woman or a Black young girl as
yeah,
opposed to, so it is layered, it is complex, right? And not necessarily demonizing anybody, not next, making, but just really having a dialogue, just saying what it is, right? And a healthy dialogue,
yeah.
just what the truth is. And that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, we have some very, positive politicians in the UK. We have some very negative ones, but there's quite a few politicians here in the UK that I have a lot of respect for who stand up, women politicians who stand up and say, I get a lot of hate when I'm online, and it's not right. It's not right that people say really unpleasant things to me. They make threats, etc. And there was a time, and I think maybe we're shifting where people were arguing, the freedom of the internet and the free speech. I'm allowed to say what I think. It's my right to say what I think. But I think maybe we're vectoring away from that now. And I think about, if I think about one platform in particular, which just does seem to have gone down the drain, which is X, which is used to be a platform in which there was a vibrant debate, if sometimes challenging and angry, and you had trolls, but it certainly isn't now, and it seems quite a difficult, even dangerous space. And you may not want to talk about that specifically, but I can. I'm happy to say that sort of, I think it's become quite an unpleasant place to be on.
Yeah, it's a definitely fine line between freedom of speech and saying your opinion, because your opinion can incite
Right,
certain things in people
exactly.
and ignite certain things in violence, and for feelings that probably lay dormant in people,
Yeah,
right? So it's very a fine line of freedom of speech, right? Or have an opinion, right? So you don't want something where everybody's so sensitive you can't say anything, but you
yeah,
don't want a situation where, again, it incites violence, or you're just attacking someone's character or their physical attributes. You do not want that, because that's not, even though that's your opinion, it doesn't have any discourse, any good discourse, right? Because then, as you say, it's more of attacking when you're doing things like that. it's more attacking. It can become violent. It can become bullying. So, and it can become scary because people can dox your address and find you and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because of something you said or hack into you. So it can be very, very dangerous, as far as, like I said, the freedom of speech and,
Yeah.
you know, it's very,
I mean,
a
one of the things
fine
I
line.
think about is that, we're constantly around various bits of technology and throughout history having this conversation about individual liberty and freedom versus what society can reasonably expect in terms of protection. And an example is, for example, I am old enough to remember the days when we didn't have seatbelt laws in cars. And
Me
people
too.
would, right, exactly. And people would drive around. And then I remember when the laws came in and people would argue, but it's my right to drive
To
without a
do.
seatbelt. Okay.
Oh, no, no, no. There was a seatbelt law, right? Informal. It was your mom doing this, right? Like holding your
That's
chest.
right.
That was the
That's right.
official
It's
seatbelt,
the
right?
seatbelt
That was
of
the
mom.
official, yeah, the seatbelt of mom, right?
That's
SOM.
right.
So that was what the official
But
seat.
that one never needed a law.
Yeah,
That's just that came from God, I think. That wasn't
yeah.
a law of any government. That's sort of like
So yeah, but you're right. It's like what is your right? What is infringing that the government is now telling me I can or I can't do, right? How do I govern myself, right? You see that with women's rights, like you see everything that's happening with women's rights, right? Where's the line between government, and I know it sounds like the boogeyman government, right? But where's the line between government and governing yourself,
yeah.
right?
And
So
I think it's that thing of, I because of the privilege that I have, and I don't decide to have this, it's society accords it to me. I'm less likely to have violent or negative consequences from somebody else saying something than maybe you are, because that's the
oh
truth.
yeah,
That's the
definitely.
reality. And we need to
Yeah.
sort of look at that genuinely. And particularly in this context of having our kids there on social media as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like, so I'm just saying, if you a young Black girl and your look, as far as attractiveness, may not be of European descent, or may not, your features may be something, someone may attack you and tell you, verbally attack you, like you're not pretty. You're not
Yeah,
this, you're too dark. You're not good enough. And then, so I can imagine what that'll do to a 13-year-old girl
yeah,
who now becomes a 40-something-year-old woman,
yeah,
right?
quite.
How did, so it is, you know, there are different conversations that different cultures have to have with their children, and when they're on social media, and how they digest it, and how they, because again, the subcultures are different.
Yeah,
Right? We're all the same, but the subcultures are different.
yeah,
So yeah, so it can do irreparable harm. Or a young boy, a young Black boy who's identified as being a thug at the age of 4 or 5, right? Because that's the image that they keep putting out, right? And it may not apply to him, but he's like, is this who I am, right? So he's self-identifying through the messages he's seeing on social media.
yeah. Well, what we're not sort of maybe talking about there is the fact that as a little boy, he's getting frightened by those images and thinks he has
Yeah,
to toughen up and
yeah,
look after himself because he's perceiving a threat to himself, and how we
yeah.
create those vicious cycles. Let's just, in terms of, let's keep it sort of broad for now, if that's okay. And let's say there's a difference in gender representation and experience online, and you've written about particularly young women's experience. So how would you characterize the difference between the experience of a young man and a young woman online these days?
Yeah, I think I think women, beauty has always been, unfortunately, our currency, right?
Yeah,
So to speak. And what happens is people judge you on that, or you may compare yourself to other people because of it.
yeah,
So, other women. So if we just want to stick on gender, right? So you're going to compare yourself to other women, right? Like, do I look like her? Am I slim like her? Am I overweight? Do I have to take a million pictures to look like this? So, or you may see a young girl that's getting a lot of attention, right? That looks a certain way. So you feel like, well, maybe I need to do that. So there's definitely a big difference how young girls and young boys look, right? So you may look at peer pressure, right? So it's a lot. It's very different. Boys have their their own ills when it comes to social media, but I think for young women is definitely around beauty and beauty standards.
And whether you fit in with those beauty standards or not.
Yeah, and whether you fit into those beauty standards, and right, and so what young girls, what happens a lot is seeking external validation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I need
And one of
someone
the
to
things
tell
that
me.
you've written about, I think, and one of the things I'm quite concerned about is the increasing lowering age of sexualization of young women, particularly online, the objectification of girls.
Oh, absolutely. So that's something to not only like you said, so it's like younger girls, younger and younger being sexualized, right? But also too on the other end, the algorithm, right? We kind of talked a little bit about the algorithm, but you think that the algorithm can now start targeting. So if it's a guy or young woman, a woman, whoever is like young girls, and then he may like it. So the algorithm, because it's not human, is sending this person all these pictures of these young girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that is just feeding the beast, right? So it is a very, 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 very slippery slope, right? When it comes to things like that, how what's fed to us, what's in our feed, how we're targeted.
Yeah.
And you don't even know that you target. I mean, we all been there. Like you talk about some water, and the next thing you know, it pop up on your phone, right?
Exactly. Like I had to buy a suitcase, a piece of luggage to take on a plane with me, and suddenly across every single platform, it's advertising luggage at me.
Yeah.
And because I just simply did one search, and so these bags are coming up,
Just
and we
pop
all
up
have
everywhere.
that experience. Now, the point about these algorithms, and you say that they don't have any thoughts, like you and I, when we're discussing these issues, we're not computers, we're not machines, so we are thoughtful and creative in our responses. And it's also based upon experience, personal experience, and things like, I find it distasteful and upsetting to hear hate, because it hurts me as a human being, right?
Yeah.
Who I am. And so I will make choices about filtering that out and stopping it and challenging it, whereas an algorithm doesn't.
No, they just feed you the stuff.
Right.
And or they know, because they say when social media, the advent of social media, what they did was like really kind of mimic casinos.
Yeah.
Right. As far as like the dopamine system is, in it. So they're going to feed you what they know that you like. I mean, to the point that I could definitely see the near future, it will know you better than you know yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, big
right?
information is the currency, isn't it? Big information, getting as
Yeah.
much information
So,
about people. And so
how
coming back
scary
to
is that?
So what we seem to be hearing and what we seem to be seeing is this sort of extreme move towards the extreme edges of experience, particularly with gender experience online. So thinking about young women and young men, with young men being fed images of being perpetrators and young women being fed images of being victims of. So the girls have to fit into certain hypersexualized images. That they are things to be observed and taken control of, etc. And they have this sort of getting worse and worse and worse, and young men being fed images. And so you have this fed images of being the perpetrator, the big shot, the person who goes out, and this is shaping their experience. And so that's quite a worrying thing to hear that as a father of a son, it worries me because I don't want my boy like that. Do you know what I mean? I sort of definitely.
Yeah, it's like you have to be very, you have to be in tune with like what they're, looking at, right? Kids are very savvy. Like if you have a teen, they'll run circles around us, right? So it's not like what I say in the book. It's like you're not going to stop it, right? So you really just need to find a way to navigate it, to have a dialogue, to get involved, because you're not going to stop it. You have the metaverse, like it's as technology is evolving, it's becoming more alluring, right? What they say, like 95% of kids from the ages of like I think 13 to 17 have social media.
Yeah.
So even if you think of from a corporate level, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a lot of money if I'm feeding beauty products, if I'm feeding lipstick and lip gloss
Yeah.
and hair products and how to stop aging, right? So it's not only targeting young girls, but how it can target older women that have disposable income.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you're saying about then engagement, I guess what you're talking about is not trying to stop your kid using these things, but actually forming a relationship with them and understanding how they are using it.
How
So,
they're using it, right? So because you can't tell them like, do not do that. I think the days of saying, don't do that, do as I say, not as I do is over, right? Because kids are watching,
yeah.
right? So they're watching, they're paying attention, even when you don't think they are. So it is having a discussion with them, asking them scenarios, right? Just even showing them like, oh, look, this is, what do you think about this? Having these discussions and talking to them. Half the time they're going to tell you don't get it, but at least you having a dialogue, you have an idea what they're doing. And what's equally important, you model the behavior
Right.
that you want your kids to do, right? So if you're on social media all the time and you're not paying attention, I mean, he or she is going to do the same thing, right? So you have to model the behavior. If you're on social media, I'm pretty sure, parents are friends with their kids and they see that you are, being mean or saying hateful things or, things of that sort. It's not a good example because it just says it's okay.
So you would encourage parents to have their social media platforms, but then be thoughtful about how to use them.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that, you should really incorporate practices like that. So if you detox, like if you want your kid to be like, listen, we're going away, no screen time for nobody, but you have to adhere to it too, right? Or if you, yeah, if you're just like, you know what, dinner time, we turn off notifications, right? You have to adhere to those things too. So you want to definitely want your kids to model the behavior. It's not going to stop. They're not going to stop doing it. But what you want is for them to that you just have a dialogue and an open discourse with them to kind of
and I guess
how
what it makes me think of is because I mean my experience is that there's a lot of fears that parents have about strangers and stuff like this, and our kids meeting strangers. So it's always the stranger, isn't it? Sort of like that.
But here's the thing: it's not. I tell people, and I tell my daughter too. You don't have to look for the white van. The white van is your phone now.
Yeah.
The white van is your phone, right? Yeah. People having access to it. And kids are smart enough. They be like, oh no, I'm not gonna do that. But you don't know if it's an adult acting like a kid.
Yeah. You don't know. Well, we don't know anything. I mean, it seems to be one thing you're saying is thinking about that. We always we do say to our kids, don't we? If somebody comes up to you that makes you feel uncomfortable, come and tell me. You won't get into trouble. I won't tell you you're wrong. But if an adult makes you feel uncomfortable, you can always come and talk to me no matter what. But we seem to forget that when it comes to social media somehow. And we get into this, don't do that. That's wrong. Don't use it, as opposed to that fundamental skill we need, which you're advocating for, which is form a relationship with your kid around what they're doing.
Around what they're doing. Ask them how, like the things that their friends are doing. What are they seeing? What would they do in this situation? What advice would you give your friends? So once you kind of empower them so that they can be heard and that you're listening to them, you'll find that it's a better relationship. You find at the house, like, okay, if he or she encountered a certain situation, they may not follow it to the T, but at least they have some remnants of like what to do, right? It's a familiar situation. We talked about it. If they have friends and their friends are in a situation, they can really, tell their friends, like, they'll probably take it as their own, like they said it first, but they'll be like, hey, you should probably do this, right? So yeah, so I think that's really important, to just like not shut it down, but just listen, observe.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, because we want to protect, right? So I think as parents, we want to just like protect, and we know the perils that can happen with this thing. But and then also not make it seem like it's the boogeyman, because there are a lot of good benefits to social media as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you do not try to cast it as like this evil portal that sucks souls, right? But to just say like, no, there are benefits to social media. There are really good benefits to it, right? But we just need to know how to navigate it so we can still maintain our
Yeah.
self-esteem, self-awareness, because these things are going to happen.
Yeah. But I guess
So,
it's also, I mean, I think, you and I, we need to be aware as parents as well, don't we, that this is the world our kids are in. And we didn't grow up in this, but they were born into it and growing up, and it's
yeah,
a really integral part of their experience. And
yeah,
sort of having talked to young people about it, they tell me that it's really important to have X type of profile because of their group, their network is part of it, and their potential employers. They might make a living out of it. It's an important part of their potential earning power in the future, etc. So you're right, it is really important. And again, it's also, there is plenty of evidence that online gaming, for example, can be very healthy neurologically. My son is really into his games, and we don't want to stop him. And for him, when he plays, and I got to learn about this, I didn't know this initially, but when he's playing online, he's often playing with his school friends. And so we would do these really strange things where we'd say, go and play with your friends. Don't play this stupid computer game. But he'd look at us confused. But I am playing with my friends.
I am playing with my friends. So it looks different, right? So that's what I'm saying. You have to make space that it looks different, right? So the kids are not like how we used to be, where they're,
Right.
hanging outside all the time. They grew up in it. So they're making TikToks, right? I have nieces that if you leave them outside for 5 minutes, they're doing a TikTok dance, right? So as opposed to be like, no, don't do that. It's just like, there's fun in it too, right? You don't want to take away the fun, just like no one took away our fun, right? So there's fun in it. And again, it's just having that conversation that when you do come across things, or letting them know like, hey, a lot of this stuff is smoke and mirrors. People are showing you the highlights. Do not compare yourself, right? Do not seek out external validation. Setting boundaries, right? Looking who you are befriending and who's your friends, right? Not getting stuck. So putting those things in place, right? With your kids, right? How to set boundaries, how to detox. Who are you following? How are you curating your feed, right?
And
Now,
also, crucially, I think, how are you behaving yourself as my child online? So I remember my
yeah.
mum being very concerned about how I presented myself to other people, and I presented myself in a polite way, that it was kindness was very important. And I think we do need to talk to our kids about these things, about if they see bullying, what would you do about it? Would you challenge it? Would you join
What do
in?
you do? And
Exactly.
can you identify it? Because it looks different to different people,
Yes.
right? If you're a young 15-year-old kid, so a 13-year-old kid may look at bullying different than a 17-year-old kid. And it
Absolutely.
may look different than what it looks like to me, right? Because at our age, we didn't really have a concept of bullying so much, right? It was just like, okay. But it looks different to different people in different ages, right? So you also have to be cognitive as a parent of that, right? Um, does your
Absolutely.
kid, would he or she know to what it looks like,
Yeah.
right? So that's the conversation you have. Like, have you seen somebody be bullied before? What does that look like to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Really good stuff. Look, I told you we would get to the end of the show, which we have, and you wouldn't have noticed that the time had flown
I
because
know.
an hour, right? That's an hour. We could keep going, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. What's your book called, Latasha?
It's called Be You No Filter.
The You Know
You
Fit.
could Be You No Filter: How to Maintain Your Self-Esteem While on Social Media.
Great. Well, we'll put a
Um,
link to it. I guess people can buy it online if they want.
yes, they can buy it online. They can buy it on Amazon. So if you put in Amazon, you can put Latasha Blackmond. You can put Be You No Filter. It'll pop right up.
Great. And do you have social media profiles where people can contact you?
Yeah, you can follow me. My name is my full name is Latasha Blackmond 78 on Instagram. That's probably the best place to kind of find me is on Instagram,
And
and you can
folks,
find
when
me
you're
there.
watching this video, you should have links to all these things as well. I'll make sure my
Yes.
guy puts the links out. Anything else? Do you have a website as well, Latasha?
No, not at this time, but I think the book, and a lot of people has been sending DMs to me that read the book and found
Great.
my book. Because I've done a lot of uh, talk shows and radio shows in the UK,
Yeah.
and I've met quite a few friends and from the
Great.
UK. Yeah, so
It's
definitely
absolutely
send me a DM.
crucial stuff. And I think it's also it's really important. You're a communications expert, you're a professional, but you're also a mum who grapples with these issues, and that experience is vital. I'm really support this notion, and I'm a great fan of the idea of don't try and stop your kids, try and guide them.
Just try to guide them and model the behavior that you want to see.
You want a relationship with your kids that is safe around this stuff, so that if anything untoward happens, they know who they can go and ask for help, which is us. And they should always feel that that's the safe thing.
They want to feel safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Listening, I think, it's really crucial. I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on. We have to learn from our kids about this, because I'm an old dinosaur. What do I know about it, right?
Yeah, we don't know. And they're quick and they catch it. You will never outsmart them when it comes, right? So that's what as parents just realize. I would never outsmart, right, them when it comes to this social media thing, right? So how do I still play the game, right? So because before you figure out one thing and they're on the 6 things, right? So you always be trying to catch up, right? So trying to be 40s, 50 years old, trying to catch up with a 13-year-old on technology, good luck.
Get it. You're dead in the water. That's right. So look, it's been lovely to have you on. I hope, because it's only midday for you. Well, it's 1 o'clock now, I think. But I hope the rest of your day goes well. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you. Thank
and
you for
share
having me. Thank you.
your experience with us. You stay there. I'm going to say goodbye for now, folks. I'll see you at the next show. Do check out Latasha's social media profile on Instagram. So it's Latasha Blackmond 78, and her book, the links will be underneath the show. It's a much needed piece of literature, practical, helpful advice on working with your kids to make the world a better place in social media terms. So lovely to see you. I'm not sure when this is going out. I think it might be going out in the year, but it's still, as we're recording it, it's still pre-Christmas. I'm going to wish you and your family a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year.
Thank you. And to you too as well.
All right.